Back okay? All right, so if you don't mind, I'm going to work without a microphone. Okay? The topic today is on the cover sheet of the catalog. Our lives matter, and our votes count. Our lives matter. Everybody's lives matter, including everybody in this room. But who do our lives matter to? They matter to our family, to our friends, and to our community. What about our votes? We really have one obligation for voting, and it is not the obligation to vote in an election. It's the obligation to serve on a jury and vote in that jury. And I don't want anybody in this room to forget about what it really is, the very important obligation of each and one of us individually, to vote, to attend to jury service, go to jury service, keep an open mind, a fair mind, and then vote accordingly. Today I'm speaking before the NAACP. You all are wonderful. Thank God you've kept this organization going as long as you have. Truly, yes. Give yourself a round of applause. The National Association of the Advancement of Colored People. Have we really advanced? Some of us say, well, one of them says no, one of them says yes. Okay, have we really advanced? That's a question that we have to ask ourselves. Now, a couple weeks ago, my wife and my wife's been with me for 45 years. Yeah. Some of you may wonder how I put up with it. No, in all seriousness, okay? I'm the fortunate one, there's no doubt about that. But we went to the opening of the Afro-American Museum in the District of Columbia a couple weeks ago. I strongly encourage everybody in here to go. It's awesome, it's remarkable, it's inspiring, it's emotional. You will feel sad, but you will be uplifted. Start at the bottom. And why do I say start at the bottom? Because at the bottom of the museum is where they talk about slavery. And they have the artifacts of slavery, the pictures of slavery, and they describe it. It was horrible, truly. And when you get to the top, you're going to find out about what we as Afro-Americans have contributed to our country. The wonderful things we've done in the military, in business, in science, and it's been in music and entertainment. And you're going to feel real good. You really are. It's going to be uplifting. My wife asked me the other day, what did I take away from our visit to the museum? And I didn't have to think hard about this. I was truly surprised at how short a time ago we were in slavery. It's only 150 years ago, folks. That ain't that long ago. 150 years ago, we were other people's property. Think about that for a minute. We had basically no rights. We were not allowed to vote, couldn't own property. I mean, we all know it was horrible. So you know, if nothing else, we've advanced beyond that, which that in and of itself is remarkable. But how else have we advanced? Have we really made advancement in all the areas that are important in our lives? Well, the Urban League 40 years ago started a project where they measure the advancement of colored people. And they measure our advancement by looking to see how we're doing relative to white people. And that makes sense. Because we've been discriminated against, we've been segregated. White people have had a certain level of success that we have not been able to enjoy because we've been treated differently. So over time, have we been able to close that gap? And that's what the Urban League has measured. They started doing this 40 years ago. And 40 years ago, I started with politics in D.C. So I'm going to talk to you about how we have advanced, specifically how we in the District of Columbia have advanced, talk to you about why we have advanced, and then I'm going to suggest to you a plan of action that I think is important for you that you can use to talk about to decide how to vote, who to vote for, and why it makes a difference. So let's talk about advancement. Have we advanced? The Urban League says that we have advanced in education, no doubt about that. We have more people of color graduating from college, high school, getting advanced degrees than ever before. The advancement is clear. We've moved up, and we will continue to do so. I do believe that. There's no doubt about that. And it is very significant. We have made advancement in what I consider the most important area, longevity. 40 years ago, we only lived to the age of 65, 68 on average. Now, on average, we live to the age of 75. That's important. That's important for many different reasons. We've learned certain things. The doctors have learned certain things. That's important. We have not made any progress in unemployment. We got just as many of us unemployed now as we had back then, 40 years ago. Very little advancement. We have not made advancement in home ownership. We're still renters, but we don't seem to own very many homes, okay? We own more cars than we used to own. I really don't know why, and I'm not going to address why we own more cars, but we do. In most other areas, things have kind of leveled off. Although probably, in terms of going to prison, there's been no advancement. Okay, we're not closing that gap at all. But let me tell you, in the District of Columbia, we're booming. We are a destination city in the District of Columbia. And yet, in the District of Columbia, we have been majority Afro-American now for almost 40 years. So why, if we have been majority Afro-American, how have we been able to advance so much beyond what other Afro-Americans in the rest of the country? What explains that? I believe it is explained by our power of the vote. We exercise our power to vote in the District of Columbia. And we have looked at the candidates who run for office, and we've elected good people. Now, some of you in this room, I'm going to mention some names in a moment about some of the people we've elected. Some of you've heard of, I'm sure. We have tried to elect people, and I believe we have elected people of, number one, good character. If you want to advance, you have got to elect people of character. Not just somebody who's got plans, not somebody who just talks, but somebody who lives the walk. Someone who has a person of integrity, someone who cares about people in the community, and somebody who does have a plan to advance people. And it doesn't matter whether this politician is black or white or Asian or a man or a woman or gay. It doesn't matter as long as they are a person of character and have a good plan to succeed. So let's look at what we've done in the District of Columbia. Who have we elected? We elected a man named John Wilson as our city council chairman. Mr. Wilson came out of the civil rights movement. Very volatile character, but he loved people. He believed in equality of all people. And John Wilson had a plan. His plan was we would fill our city up with dinks. D-I-N-K-S. And somebody here is going to say, what in the world is a dink? And a dink is a double income, no kids. Double income, no kids. Why would we want double income, no kids? Because they don't take much by way of public services. They're not sending their kids to schools. People aren't getting in trouble. They don't need a lot of services. And you know what we have now in the city? We got dinks everywhere. Everywhere. John Wilson was so good we named our city hall after him. It's called the Wilson Building. Okay? It sits right on the corner of 14th and Pennsylvania Avenue. I served on the city council with John Wilson. Back then, we had a lot of problems. And one of our biggest problems was economics. It was finance. Back then, city didn't look like it looks now. We were a sleepy southern town. Had very little economic development. There were no cranes in the air, no buildings going up. In fact, in 1994, a book was written called Dream City. And the subtitle of that book is Race and Politics, the Decline of the Nation's Capital. That's 1994. You live close enough that I know that everybody in this room periodically goes up to the District of Columbia. We are not in decline today. No way. We are a destination city. Smart people from all across the world want to come to D.C. Smart people who live in other parts of the country want to come to D.C. If you look for new housing in the District of Columbia, the title normally says luxury. all right, because we got people with money moving into town. Not only that, we've done some phenomenal things with education in our area. The people we have elected to office, everybody commits themselves to education. That's number one. You cannot get elected in the District of Columbia without pledging support, financial support, economic support. You cannot get elected without pledging you're going to put money on our schools. It's just nobody can get elected without doing that in the District of Columbia, and it's made a difference. In the last couple of years, we have spent billions of dollars on our schools, elementary, junior high school, and high school. We have a community college, UDC. We've built brand new buildings. I will put our public schools up against any public school in the nation. That's how much money we spend on these schools now. You go in, they're gorgeous. Cafeterias, gymnasiums, science labs, artificial turf on the fields outside, kids everywhere, books in the library. Not only that, we spent hundreds of millions of dollars on new libraries. And what's interesting about libraries aren't just used by young children. They're actually primarily used by senior citizens. Think about it. Senior citizens who have nothing to do, when I say nothing to do, they're not working. They go to libraries, okay? And senior citizens, by the way, are very much engaged in the District of Columbia. We've got an Office of Aging. It provides services for them. Our Recreation Department organizes them. We've got volunteer activities. We have also spent money on our recreation facilities. It used to be that you'd go to a basketball court, there'd be basketball hoops at each end, but only one would have a hoop and the other one wouldn't. Or one might have the netting up and the other one wouldn't. And there'd be cracks in the basketball court. You can't find a basketball court like that anymore in the District of Columbia. What happened to us that we went from a place where in 1994 the authors said we were in decline, and now we're a destination city? I submit to you it's because of the people we elected, and how we elected them, and who we elected, and why we elected them. Everybody in this room has heard of our mayor, our ex-mayor. Yeah. We called him Mayor for Life, Marion Barry. Now you all have seen him because he did the crack cocaine with that woman, all right? That's what you may know about him. But when Marion first got elected, he was absolutely committed to the equality of people and bringing people of color up and into the mainstream of life in the District of Columbia. He created a summer jobs program that we didn't have before. Give that a round of applause. These young kids out here need something to do with the summertime. It's wonderful these kids in these orange shirts came here today, but what do they do in May and June and July, and August when they're out of school? We need to have some organized activity for them. Marion created the summer jobs program. Although he died several years ago, we now call that the Marion Barry Summer Jobs Program. You all know about Marion's moral weaknesses. But the one thing about Marion Barry, he actually didn't steal money. No matter what you've heard about him, that man has stolen money, he'd be in jail. Believe me. He cared about people. My wife and I knew Marion very well. He was our friend. We argued with him, don't get me wrong, and I'm not condoning some of the things he did personally. But when you go to the District of Columbia and you look around, and my wife and I live up on 16th Street, and I'll tell you right now, some of the opportunities I've had in life is because Marion Barry paved the way. He would not sit still. He and others. My mentor was Wilhelmina Rolark. Her husband was Calvin Rolark. They had a saying, if it is to be, it is up to me. Independence, self-independence. You've got to have that strength. We elected people that had that in mind. You need to do that. Okay? But that's character. That's a character of people. And when I say to you it doesn't matter about race, we had a chairman of the city council, Dave Clark. And understand something, we're a majority black city, and we elected a white man as chairman of our city council, Dave Clark. Again, a guy that had been involved in the civil rights movement. Dave was so committed to equality and helping people get out of poverty and doing right by people and sharing in the community. We named our law school after Dave Clark. It is called the Dave Clark School of Law. I like you. You clap all the time. He's a good member of the audience. Our law school, by the way, is based on the premise that everyone deserves legal representation, whether or not they have money. Everybody going into court has a right to legal representation. But not only that, through the use of the law, we can bring about meaningful social change. That's what the Dave Clark School of Law is about. And that's named after the former chairman of the city council. So these are the kind of people we elected. Have we actually progressed? Absolutely. Because when I served on the city council, we went bankrupt. We ran out of money. I can remember sitting on the council and people say, well, let's do this. How can we afford not to do it? Well, we could afford not to do it because we didn't have the money. And our big struggle back then was economic development, trying to create the atmosphere and the environment by which people could make money, where we Afro-Americans could have jobs in the government, could have jobs in the private sector, would get the contracts from the government, with the idea being as we expanded the middle class, other people would join the middle class and we would all benefit from that. Our current mayor, Muriel Bowser, and I served as a chairperson for Muriel Bowser's election. I also served as chairperson for the mayor before her, Adrian Fenty. Muriel's campaign slogan is expanding the middle class. But I say that to you because you've got to listen to the plans these politicians have. Where are they putting the emphasis? We in the District of Columbia now, Kaylee, are moving on to human development. We were putting emphasis before on economic development because we needed to get the infrastructure. Now that we have the infrastructure, if you've been in D.C. recently, you look around at cranes everywhere. You would think the crane is a bird in the District of Columbia. We have so many up in the sky. Right? But what we also now stress more and more is human development. We have been rated one of the best cities in the world to live in at this point in time. We have great longevity among our population. Some place rated us recently as one of the most physically fit in the nation. I've told you about our schools. I've told you about our rec centers. I've told you about our libraries. All of this is what our government is now doing for us. Well, you may say, well, that's nice, Lightfoot, but what about us here in West Virginia? How do we get to share in that? How do we advance those of us who live in West Virginia so we can have the kind of success that you in D.C. have been achieving? I want to suggest to you a plan. I want to suggest to you some way that you can measure your politicians, your elected officials, so you can be sure that they're going to deliver the kind of things that you want and that you need. I mentioned earlier about the Urban League. The Urban League not only did a study of Black America, they do one every 2 years, and they've been doing this for the last 40 years, they have also come up with a plan of various programs that they say at the Urban League, having studied this for 40 years, are the very types of things we need to do to advance Afro-Americans out of poverty. So I'm going to go down this list with you, and I'm going to tell you what's going on in D.C., only because I want you to think about this in the context of those people you will soon be voting for in the next election. And if they're not committed to these type of plans, you need to ask yourself who you are going to vote for. Urban League recommends we have universal early childhood education. Absolutely. We do in D.C. All right, we've got this early childhood education because our politicians have made a commitment to children. They've made a commitment to education. And if anybody can't tell you they're going to donate money, they're going to contribute money, they're going to vote for money to go to your schools, like your school here at Shepherd, your Shepherd University, don't vote for them. They're not doing you any favors if they're not doing anything for your kids. That's not the kind of person you want as a leader. If they're not putting resources in your school, they're not doing anything for your future. And if they ain't working on your future, don't help them get that job. If you do, then just be content to stay where you are. Okay, and I'm not recommending anybody stay where you are. You always want to reach for more into the future. Minimum wage should be raised to $15 an hour. That's so people can have a decent wage to begin with. We're raising our minimum wage to $15 an hour in D.C. Why? Because our elected official, my mayor, said we're going to do that because she's going to help people. You want to fund comprehensive urban infrastructure. What that means is your schools, libraries, rec center, roads, we in D.C. public, our transportation system, which you all read about and how the problems we have. But when it functions, it does a great job. And we certainly rely upon it, but hey, we got it in the ground, we got to do better with it. There's no doubt about that, okay? Small business financing. Now, let me discuss this with you because I personally believe this is very important. We know nationally that small businesses create more jobs than the big businesses. Hard to believe, but it's true. And small businesses are the very types of things that individuals can get involved in. We can help them lift themselves out of poverty. We can lift people up so they can expand the middle class. So what are your candidates doing about small businesses? What kind of financing plans do they have for small businesses? What kind of resource centers do they have for small businesses? If they can't answer intelligently, then you all need to look for another candidate. All right? Expansion of the summer youth program. If you don't have a, you ought to have a program for summer jobs for your kids when they're out of school. You cannot just rely upon the private sector to do that. If you're going to just rely upon the private sector to do that, you're going to have high unemployment with your teenagers. And if you have high unemployment with your teenagers, you're going to have idle hands. And what are idle hands? And there you all know it. So, if your politicians aren't talking about a summer jobs program, don't give them your vote. Because they're not doing anything to help you and your kids. Expand home ownership. We have got programs in D.C. to expand home ownership. What do you have? If you don't have anything now, what are your politicians recommending to you? Vote for those that are promising a specific plan for home ownership. Now, we have another problem in D.C. that hopefully you don't have as bad as we have it here, but it is nationwide. We call them returning citizens. Some people call them criminals, ex-criminals. But the point is they've paid their time, they're out of jail, and they're coming back into our communities. And if we don't find a way to provide something meaningful for them to be engaged in doing, something constructive in our communities, show that we will try and help them with their reentry, what do you think they're going to do? You know what they're going to do. We have an Office of Ex-Offenders in the District of Columbia. We have programs for ex-offenders. We have candidates who ran on a platform of helping citizens to re-enter our community. Urban League says you ought to have a plan like that. I say you ought to have a plan like that. And if your politicians don't tell you they have a plan, don't vote for them. College affordability. You have a gorgeous school right here. I mean, the cameras were on, Dr. Henry. Yes, give it a round of applause, honestly. Look around you. I mean, we ate a good meal. They do fix good food, if nothing else. All right? But it looks good. But we have to make college affordable. We in the District of Columbia have created a program, and my son took advantage of it. They gave us daughter, and my daughter, thank you. I'm thinking about my son because I'm still paying his tuition bill. But we have a program like that. What are your politicians telling you? Now, in the district, of course, we're bigger than you are, we're different than you are, but we have some really impoverished neighborhoods. There's no doubt about that. As much as I tell you things are great in D.C., you probably say, well, yeah, but what about over there? And what about this part of town? We have created special incentives for businesses to locate in these underserved areas, these impoverished areas. We call it the empowerment of the green zones. That's what the Urban League says as well. What are your people running for office saying? If they don't have a plan to help people out of poverty, if they don't have a plan to help those neighborhoods that are not doing well, don't vote for them. And then lastly, the affordability of high-speed broadband access, the internet. Now, I mentioned this to Dr. Hendricks a moment ago. I came here and I sat in this building and I turned on my iPad and I thought I'd have access to Wi-Fi. And I didn't. No, I did not. But I need a password. I go to hotels without a password and get on their Wi-Fi. You have got to have people have ready access to the internet. If you can't give kids and adults and senior citizens easy access to the internet, you are absolutely failing because your society will not advance. When we renovated all these libraries in D.C., they don't have a lot of books anymore. They have workstations with computers, you know, and the screens, all right? And the access to different programs. That's how people learn now. That's what we need access to. Look how much, anybody in here shop online? Yeah, look at you, okay? Just imagine if you couldn't shop online, okay? Think about that. But you need high-speed internet access at a low cost in order to do that. So what does that have to do with our votes matter? Our votes count. That's how they count. If you vote for people that will pledge themselves to bring into effect the kind of plans that I talked about, then your votes count. Then they count to improve our lives. They count to improve our children's lives. But that's how they count. Only if we vote wisely. And let me just say, when the Urban League looked at statistics about how things have advanced, and we talk about civic engagement in the Urban League report, they talk about voting. And folks, we're not voting like we used to vote. We're not. We turned out for Obama's elections. And we turned out big time. But when he's not on the ballot, we haven't voted. Okay? And that's down at the lower level, the county level, the state level, the city level. We have to turn out the vote. I'm a politician. I ran twice for the city council in the District of Columbia. I won both times. I've never been defeated. I just said I had enough. I didn't want to run anymore. I have chaired 2 successful mayoral campaigns in the District of Columbia, and I'll chair a 3rd one within the next 2 years. So I just say that to you. I have some sense of how important the vote is, and I know what politicians respond to. If you want to make this a great university, if you want to see this university get the resources it needs, if you want to see your kids have a chance to go to a college which is affordable, you can't leave it just to Dr. Hendricks. You got to tell these politicians to give some money to this school. Just that plain and simple. Now I think I've just about used up my time. So let me end with why our lives matter. I've talked to you about our votes, and that's important. The slogan of our lives matter. We've all heard this about Black Lives Matter. And it gets a little confusing sometimes. Well, why do Black lives matter and white lives don't matter? That's not what people are saying. Nobody is saying that Black lives matter in lieu of white lives. No, everybody's life matters. But what I want to talk to you about is how our individual lives matter. This lady here has been nodding her head back and forth. God bless you.
I hear you, brother.
All right, thank you. I say that because our lives matter to our family. My life matters to my wife. Her life matters to me. That's totally separate from us voting. I help her, she helps me. All right, that's how our lives matter. Our lives matter to our children. My son is standing up in the back of the room there. He's got the blue shirt on. All right? Give him a round of applause and I'll tell you why. There's no doubt I matter to him because I'm his meal ticket. But that's okay. That's the way it should be. We should be reaching out and helping our children up. Everybody should be trying to help their children become more than what they are in their lives. Everyone, and that's the same for all children. I don't help him at the exclusion of other children. You don't do that. We're trying to lift them all up. We have a short period of time on this planet. And we're always trying to live as long as we can. And Lord knows I'm trying to live as long as I can. But when you get to the end of it, you want to feel like your life mattered. And how will we know your life mattered? We're going to get your children. How'd you raise them? What are they doing? Right. When they get ready to put you in the ground or cremate you, who's going to come to your funeral? Those people that you have helped. Those people that you've been important to along the way. Those people that remember you in a fond way and will say, yeah, his life or her life mattered to me. So your lives matter not to our children, to our spouses, but to our community as well. That's what's important. That's how we have advanced. That's how we will continue to advance. We have made tremendous progress as a people. 150 years out of slavery. Look at us. We're sitting here We look intelligent. You all look good. Really, you look good. But you look good because somebody went before you and helped you up along the way. All right, never, ever forget that. So let me close this way. Number one, vote. There should be no excuse for anybody in this room not voting.
Amen.
If you don't vote, you should be embarrassed. Absolutely embarrassed. And I think most of the people in here do vote. But you got to go find the people who don't vote and make them vote. Take them to the polls. Convince them to vote. All right? And the other thing is, when you get called for jury service, go. Keep an open mind. Be fair-minded. It is the one way in our lives to equal the playing field. Because when you walk in that court, it doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor. All right? Justice will prevail. And then lastly, those people that you love, care for them. Be kind to them. Do not be angry. I'm sorry, I was going to end, but I got to say this because I've seen them so many times. Love people. Honestly, be pleasant to people. You all have a culture of being nice. I've talked to people in here. I've smiled at people. People smile back. We've shook hands. That's important. That kindness is very important. Continue to do that. Because it's that love that brings us together. And when somebody loves you and you love somebody else, your life really does matter then. Thank you very much.